Welcome, pagans, heathens, and curious Christians to Pagan Haven, an educational tour of paganism. I'm your host, Ashra Dawn, and I'm actually joined by my co-host, James Ferguson.
Good evening.
James is actually from across the pond in the beautiful country of Scotland. We actually met on Xbox 7 years ago, playing a game that I was just obsessed with at the time called Ark. I have always been obsessed with Scottish culture and paganism as a whole, and when I was younger, I was actually playing a game called Age of Mythology, which was a game that had different types of gods and goddesses in it, like Greek, Norse, Egyptian, and I was just so interested in it. So,
Is that the one on PC?
Yes, it is actually on PC. I absolutely love that game. I actually just got it for PC again because they even revamped it and added different gods and goddesses and different religions into it, which is just so cool.
Oh, nice. Fucking the closest thing to anything like that I've played is Smite, where all their gods from all sorts of religions.
Yeah, so Smite is a game where you're fighting other people, but Age of Mythology is actually a game where you're fighting mainly PCs. You can play it online, but I just enjoy doing the PC version.
Don't blame you.
Right. But yeah, I started studying religions at age 10 just because my family was Christian. I didn't feel like I fit in Christianity. So after playing this game, I got so interested in the gods and just started studying. And here I am 17 years later, and I've been studying this entire time. I actually started on TikTok where I was just doing cosplays, and every once in a while I would talk about my paganism, and it kind of blew up, and now here we are, and I am now teaching paganism to you guys alongside James. Over the years that me and James have known each other, which was 7, he's always talked to me about the...
Oh, wow.
What?
7 years, 7 years of dealing with you. Look at that.
Yeah, 7 years. We were both 20, which is just crazy.
Oh, man, now I feel old. What are you doing to me?
Trust me, I feel old. I've been finding gray hairs and I'm just not happy about it.
Because you are old. What are you on about?
Oh, if I'm old, you're old.
I suppose. I'll take it.
But yeah, over the years, James has told me all about how Scotland has these pagan Viking festivals in the autumn in the Highlands of Scotland.
Not quite like festivals, but more like shows, weekends. The Viking experience one that I told you about looked mint. Personally, I just seen a bunch of photos and my ex's mum and partner told me about it. I wanted to go just because it was all about Vikings. Absolutely love Vikings. How can you not love a Viking? Man, right. All hell.
Right. And me being a Norse pagan, obviously, I love that and the history behind Vikings and everything, and definitely something I want to do if I ever go to Scotland, which I plan to go to Scotland, just I don't know when.
When you're over here, you gotta try Buckfast, mate.
I have to try what?
Buckfast.
What's that?
It's a tonic wine.
Oh,
anybody from anywhere that comes to Scotland has to try Buckfast. Just even try it.
Okay, I'll try it for you.
Don't have a choice. That's the funny part.
So yeah, when this idea for a podcast came along, obviously I had to go right to James and be like, hey, do you want to do this podcast? And obviously he was down for it. So this is actually
couldn't say no,
right? Well, you can't say no to me.
Just a random pot. Well, don't know about that, but podcast.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, this is going to be our first episode, and for our first episode, we decided to cover Swin, since we are in the month of October when this episode is dropping. And especially after the past couple days I've had at work, I definitely want to teach about Swin, because everyone keeps telling me that they don't understand what Halloween is even about, why we celebrate it, that it's just a silly holiday, and it's definitely not. So we're going to get into talking about Swin. We're going to be talking about the past of Swin. We're going to talk about modern day Swin. So yeah, let's get into it. Swin is historically observed through Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man. Isle of Man being an island in the Irish Sea between England and Ireland, which if you're watching this on YouTube, I will be putting visuals up on there so you can see exactly where that is.
Yeah, one of the coolest things about Isle of Man is, yet again, world's most dangerous motorbike track. Plenty of lives have been lost there, unfortunately, but any man that goes there to race that track is unbelievable.
I have never even heard of it, so maybe I'll have to look into
Never heard of the Isle of Man TTs?
No. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Swin is actually a Gaelic festival that marks the end of harvest season and the beginning of winter, or the darker half of the year. It is actually halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, which is also known as Yule.
Which would be the darkest day of the year, no?
Yes, because the winter solstice is actually the one day a year where the sun isn't up as long. So it is the shortest day of the year, and that's when they celebrate Yule. So it can actually change, but we will get into Yule in December, where we dive into the history and modern practices of that holiday. Most of these holidays, there's just so many backgrounds to all of them, and I want to try to be able to make sure I spend each one of those months for each one of those holidays to explain it here on the podcast so that everyone can understand the history behind all of them and see how we all celebrate it now, because these pagan festivals, these Gaelic festivals, they're so rich in culture, and we see so much about nature and talking about ancestors, which is a lot of what Samhain's about. Swin is actually one of the 4 Gaelic seasonal festivals, along with Imbolc, Beltane, and Luna Saw. I might be saying those wrong, and I do apologize, but I will have the visuals up on our YouTube for you guys to see what I'm talking about. It is held on November 1st, but celebrations actually start on the evening of October 31st, because back in the day when they actually celebrated Samhain and back in the Celtic days, they believed that the days ended and began at sunset. Where we say that our days end and begin at midnight, theirs was at sunset. So we celebrate Halloween on October 31st in the evening, because that's when they would celebrate it back then, because they considered that as November 1st. So that is just a general outlook of what Swin is. We're actually going to get into the history and practices of Swin, because how are you supposed to know anything about anything if you don't learn about the history of it? So Swin was believed to have Celtic pagan origins, and some Neolithic passage tombs in Ireland are aligned with the sunrise at the time of Swin. It was first mentioned in the 19th century Irish mythology, and stories depicted a great feast and a big gathering because it's all about family and remembering your ancestors.
Seems like it would have been a really good party.
Oh, I love feasts. Feasts are my favorite. Food is my favorite. I love food.
Who doesn't love feasts, mate? It means it's got the best of the best.
Right. I'm a professional eater. It was actually believed that ancient burial mounds were opened on the night of Swin, and you'll hear this a lot where they talk about the veil, different barriers, and it is the portal to the other world, or that's what they associate it with, what's the portal to the other world. Swin was actually known to be associated with mainly bonfires and sacrifices. And thank God that we're not like that anymore. We don't do sacrifices in our practices or religions anymore, but it was a big part of it.
Yeah, both human and animal sacrifices. They were quite big on either or.
Yeah. And, just like any other religion or culture, they do have a history of sacrifices in them. But as we grow, obviously we move away from that. Samhain festivals were not actually recorded in detail until the modern era. It was known to be celebrated when the cattle were taken down from their summer pastures and brought down as livestock for slaughter. Food for the winter. Special bonfires would be lit, and they were believed to be protective and have cleansing powers. They would be lit at the hilltops and were involved in many different rituals. Forest fire rituals were the most common in parts of Scottish Highlands, on the Isle of Man, and in North and Mid Wales up until the 19th century. Forest fires, or needle fires, are fires produced by friction and were used in most folk magic practices, and they were believed to be antidotes against bewitching and were used to ward off plagues and infectious diseases.
I'd love to be back there in that time just to find out the exact reason that they had for using that for witches. I'd love to know all the in-depth bits that they could have taught us if we were back here.
Well, I mean, they do, like, fire's meant to be cleansing, so I guess that was the idea behind it, that, like, the fire was used to be cleansing.
Oh, well, I suppose. It's believed to be cleansing in many things. A form of purification.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fire is definitely very much involved in a lot of different cultures and religions. And it always has that basis around it where it's cleansing. People would burn torches in these bonfires and then carry them back to their homes, dousing their hearths in the fire on the night of Samhain, because they believed that doing this was creating a stronger bond in their community. I really don't know the thoughts behind that one. I don't understand how using a bonfire to light your hearth is
To light,
doing a bond between community.
to light your what, sorry?
Your hearth, kind of like, you know, like old school kitchens, like it's your stove.
So you're gonna set your kitchen on fire?
With the bonfire, yes.
Not gonna lie, it just sounds like I'm making a pizza.
Well, I mean, the best pizzas are in those ovens.
No, in the middle of a bonfire though.
Just throw the pizza in the middle of the bonfire, it'll be fine.
That's mad.
Might be a little crispy though.
Mad, eh? Utterly mad.
On the night of Swin, it was believed that the boundary between this world and the other world was at its thinnest, which we talked about on the burial mounds. They believed that these spirits or these fairies called OCs or Aussies, I'm not exactly sure how to say that, so hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, but they believed that on this night where the veil was at its thinnest, it made it easier for these spirits and these fairies to be able to come into our world. And people around Swin would try to appease these fairies or these spirits by giving them food and drink. And it would basically ensure that their livestock and they would survive the winter. On the night of Swin, because of the veil between the living and the dead being at its thinnest, not only did spirits and fairies come through, but the souls of your ancestors, your kin, your family, were also thought to come through that veil to be able to visit their homes and seek hospitality within their family. Families were known to have a place setting set for their honored ancestors, the dead that would come visit them. At the head of their table, they would place a empty place setting for them, and no one would sit there because that was meant to be for their ancestors. Mumming and guising were a big part of this festival, which I just find mumming a just amusing word.
It's a weird word.
It is, and I definitely didn't know about it before this.
I mean, you both, eh? I knew about guys and I just never knew about the mumming.
Yeah. And I mean, it goes with trick-or-treating nowadays, you know. People would go door to door in costume, but they would recite verses and do skits in exchange for food instead of just going up to a door yelling trick-or-treat. People also would dress up in these disguises to also disguise themselves from the OCs, the spirits and the fairies that would do them harm, because it was believed that, you know, these malevolent spirits are coming through the veil and they're here to cause havoc. And basically, between the bonfires and disguising yourself, it was ways to protect yourself from those. Traditionally, these costumes that they would disguise themselves in were animal parts, such as the skin, the fur, the horns. I mean, they had to be creative back then because we don't have what we have now where we could just go to Spirit Halloween and buy a costume. They had to make their own out of animal parts.
But they had twigs and sticks and trees and bushes and didn't have to be animal parts.
Right. They were very creative. The masks were thought to disguise themselves from these malevolent spirits. That was the main focus that they would focus on, is getting masks, because how were the spirits or these fairies be able to identify you as a person, as a human, if you had a mask on?
I suppose it's a smart thinking, try to hide from the ghosts and the ghouls and the one time of the year where their portal, shall we say, is active.
Yeah, very, very true. Divination is also a very big part of the Swin festival. Divination is actually the practice of foretell or prophecy, and it often involved like nuts and apples and stuff more of like a harvest type of season. The color orange and black that we see with Halloween is actually very big in the traditions of Samhain, because black represented death and the fading of light, where orange represented the dawning of light. Samhain was actually supposed to be like the end of the year for pagans, because they believed that they were now going into winter, everything was starting to die, and the earth would be reborn. So black and orange represented that, where it was coming upon death and the fading of light, but also the dawning of a new light. So that is actually the history of Samhain. Before we get into what modern day Swin looks like, I want to get into our sponsors and about our brand and what we're doing here. And also we have a giveaway that I announced on TikTok a little bit ago. So we're going to announce the winner of that giveaway. First off, I want to talk about our sponsor. This podcast would not even exist if it wasn't for the Golden Silent Films podcast by Stuart Lee. This is actually someone I work with. He's had this podcast for a little while, and it talks about the beginnings of movies, talkies. It talks about silent films, the actors and actresses that paved the way for modern day actors. It's very interesting. I listen to it, and I mean, it's not my cup of tea of things that I actively listen to, but it's very educational, and I've learned so much just listening to it. And he just has such a great energy. It just makes it entertaining to listen to him. So if you have any interest in older movies, silent films, the original actors and actresses that started out what we have today, go ahead and check out Golden Silent Films, hosted by Stuart Lee. He is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just go ahead and check him out. He's awesome. He also does have Instagram pages and stuff like that. Also, I want to talk about the Astrid Army brand as a whole. This podcast is actually produced under Astrid Army, which is my brand. I created this brand about 2 years ago because I wanted to have a safe space for anyone, no matter what kind of background you have, no matter if you're a person of color, no matter your sexuality. I wanted to make sure that I had a place where everyone felt safe and basically could have a community. It's grown to be so much more than that. I never expected my brand to go the way it has, but it now is going to be publishing my books. We have a merch line with much requested t-shirts from you guys. I definitely take your guys' requests into thought when I make these things. And we do also have multiple different social media sites. We have an Instagram page, a Facebook page. We have a personal email that you can go ahead and send any of your kind of comments to, or if you have any suggestions on different type of episodes that you want to do, or you want to hear, or things that you want to learn more about, you can always go ahead and send us an email. I will also have all the information for that in my bio so that you'd be able to find out the email that you need to find and the links to whatever you're searching for. And lastly, we want to get into our giveaway. A little bit ago, I posted a video on TikTok talking about how I was going to give away one free shirt to whoever commented on one of my videos, who liked, commented, and followed me. So we actually have 22 comments on this video. So I'm going to ask that James pick a number between 1 and 22.
Ooh, wait, I know what I'm going to do. We're going to use a footballer. I'm going to take the number off his shirt because he is an absolutely amazing Croatian striker for Rangers right now, and I love him.
Okay, and who is that?
It is Mr. Kolak himself, Antonio Kolak. 9.
Number 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is awesome because I've actually have a good standing with this person. So Silk and Twisted Art, you are the winner of our free t-shirt. So I know you already have me on Snapchat and other places. So if you are hearing this, you have 1 week to claim your shirt. You can go through my Astrid Army store that is on Etsy and find what shirt, what color, and what size that you need, and go ahead and shoot me a message on Snapchat, I guess, because that is the one place that we talk back and forth to. And I want to put out that this was James who picked the number. It was not me. It just happened to be a friend of mine that won it. So congratulations.
Well, say thank you to Antonio Kolak.
Say thank you to his favorite football player. I have to say football because if I say soccer, he's gonna get mad at
Not
me.
favorite, he's just our striker right now. So I thought, yeah, go with him. He's a lucky man.
Well, that luck just pushed off into my friend. So yeah, go ahead and shoot me a message.
Also, when we're going about football, you do go on about the sport where you use your foot the entire time, not that American stuff. That's not football. That's handball. It's not football.
Whatever.
Sorry, but you play it with your hands, not your feet. How does that make sense? Why would you call it football?
Uh-huh. Okay, so now we are actually going to get into the modern day practices of Swin and what Swin looks like nowadays. In modern day Swin, rituals include dancing, feasting, taking nature walks, and building altars for your honored ancestors. Altars would be built using symbols of the harvest, including apples, pumpkins, and other fall crops. And it was always to represent the spirits of the dead. So sometimes they would place skulls or skeletons on these altars, and even photos of past loved ones that you wanted to represent on these altars. I always talk about altars on my TikTok page, and I always want to make one thing very clear is that there is no specific way to build an altar. An altar is basically your creation. Yes, there's basics that you would like to have, like candles and, certain things that are supposed to represent what you're building the altar around, but it's always what your intent is. Like, you're putting in yourself into this altar, so there's no specific guidelines of how to build one. Some Wiccans actually baked loaves of bread. They were special bread for Swin, and they would place them all on the altars to be able to feed these spirits, or we use them as offers for the OCs, which are the spirits and fairies. Wiccans would also cast circles and think of their past loved ones. When it comes to witchcraft and casting protective circles, that is basically to protect the witch that is trying to be able to do a ritual or cast a spell or anything. The circle is meant to be just a protective barrier. So they would cast these circles and think of their loved ones as a part of a ritual, and they would share stories about their ancestors, and some families even choose to just go to the cemeteries. This actually makes me think a lot of Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos is also another Halloween holiday from another culture. And it's always fascinating to see vast varieties of cultures all celebrating one night, basically the same. I mean, it's not everything that's the same about it, but you do see in Dia de los Muertos, they do food offerings, they go to the grave sites of their honored ancestors, and it's just, I love Dia de los Muertos. It's so colorful and it's so vibrant, and I just love the culture and the, atmosphere of it. I love it. And yeah, they are like more of a Christian-based faith, but they have their own kind of culture. Like you see with any kind of indigenous people, Native Americans, stuff like that, they have their own type of culture. Lighting bonfires is actually still very much a part of Swin. It is an honored tradition that symbolizes the welcoming of a new season, which is winter. So you will see a lot of bonfires when it comes to Swin. I always have a bonfire every Swin because, like I've talked about, it helps protect you against the malevolent spirits, which are coming through that veil. It's thin that night, so it makes it easier for them to come through. So it really it helps protect you and the people around you, and it just gives you kind of a cleansing start to a new year. The feasts that they would have on Swin is called silent suppers or dumb suppers. These are meant to just be silent feasts that you have with your family. And like I said before, they would place a empty place setting at the head of the table for the ancestors, their family, to be able to come and dine with them. They would also smudge the rooms with sage before dinner and remove all electronics, so there would be no distractions during this dumb supper, and they would actually, more often than not, leave young children out of this part of the festival. I mean, it's not fun for kids to have to sit there and be quiet, and it is a tradition, so basically like taking a moment of silence for your past loved ones, your honored ancestors. And as we talked about before, altars are a big part of the Samhain celebrations and rituals. You would have these altars not only for just like all of your ancestors, you can have it for a specific person if that you're trying to remember that night, but it's definitely a big part of Swin. And Wiccans actually believe placing apples or pomegranates on the altars were, a good thing to do because of the fact that apples were the fruit of death, while pomegranates were the fruit of life. So it kind of represented that balance between life and death, which is basically what Swin is about. Obviously, we still have the orange and black tradition when it comes to Swin and Halloween. You think of Halloween, you always think of orange and black. And I mean, pumpkins is the one thing you always think of, is those jack-o'-lanterns, and those colors just kind of go with it. And just wearing a costume to protect against dark spirits. Obviously, we still do that for trick-or-treating, but a lot of people don't know why we wear the costumes. Everyone just thinks it's a fun tradition where we can dress up whatever, whatever we like. I mean, I do it. I love Halloween. I love dressing up. I mean, I'm a cosplayer, so every year people ask me what I'm going to be for Halloween. I say, I don't know until the day of, because I have so many different things that I could dress up as, and it just basically depends on how I'm feeling that day. But that's basically what modern day Swin looks like. It's very similar to Halloween, how Halloween celebrates right now, except we get more into the traditions of honoring our ancestors. And, we dress up for the simple fact of protecting ourselves against the spirits and the fairies. But, Halloween is traditionally just a time that we just dress up and we go trick-or-treating. But I think we should bring back mumming. Mumming is definitely a thing we should bring back. Instead of going door to door to just say trick or treat, we should be putting on these skits and actually putting in our work for this. But that basically wraps up our podcast for today. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us on our first ever podcast. We were both very nervous and took many takes to be able to do this, but we just want to thank you for taking the time to be able to listen to us. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, on YouTube, where you actually see visuals. You get to see my beautiful, ugly face. James lives in Scotland, so he's not here to actually join us, but it's just great to have him here, have that extra voice. Our next episode is going to drop on November 15th. We're going to try to do an episode a month and try to just keep it on the 15th to keep it consistent. Right now, me and James both have full-time jobs, so with him being 5 hours ahead of me, it's a little bit hard to get together to be able to do these episodes. But further down the line, if we get more sponsors, if the merch sells, if we get to a point that we can be full-time content creators, we will post more frequently. I would eventually like to be able to get to it where we're posting once a week, but that's going to be when me and James are no longer working and we are full-time content creators. But our next episode, we're going to be getting into familiars. For people who don't know what familiars are, it's very big in the witch community. We are definitely going to get into it a lot more. James is very excited about this topic. He's the one who was saying, this is what I want to cover next. So we're getting that script worked out right now, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening.